Welcome to the Pre to Post Transplant Podcast, a podcast that brings personal stories from transplant survivors, their families, friends, and loved ones. This is where you will hear challenges and triumphs of everyone involved in this journey. Our guests will offer wisdom, advice, and inspiration on everything you want to know about transplant. My name is Jenny McFarland. I am a transplant survivor, and this is a podcast I wish I had before and immediately following my transplant. Thank you for listening. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Pre to Post Transplant Podcast, where you get to tell your side of the story. This is Jenny McFarland, your host. I have an incredible episode today. I have two guests today, but before we get into that, I just want to remind you to please leave a rating and review for the podcast. When you do that, it helps people find the podcast easier, and we want more people to listen so that we can help spread more awareness about the organ donation community. Also, if you are listening to this in real time, Wednesday, July 19th, the Pre to Post Transplant Foundation is having another transplant timeout event, which is virtual and free. And we are going to be talking about transplant medications. So if you're a recipient and you want to learn more about the medications that you're taking, or if you're just curious as to what kind of medications we have to take every day to keep us alive, well, this is going to be a great event for you to hop on and join the conversation or just listen in. You can register for the event. Like I said, it's free, it's on Zoom, and you can go to www.pretopost.org and sign up. It's on Wednesday. So, today's episode, I have two guests, Ross and Cheryl, and they're going to talk about how Ross donated his kidney to his daughter and that whole process. And then they're going to share with us how their amazing nonprofit organization was formed and inspired by Kimmy, their daughter. So let's jump right in and take a listen to this inspiring, incredibly amazing episode with my friends, Ross and Cheryl Whitty. Hi, Cheryl. Hi, Ross. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having us, Jenny.
You're welcome.
Glad to be on.
So I'm excited to talk to you guys today. I'm excited to talk about your foundation and how far you've come. But first, I want to talk about your daughter, Kimmy. And I want to ask you first about her transplant, why she needed a transplant, and where she had her transplant and when.
Okay. So in 2011, she had just turned 12 years old, and she was diagnosed with a rare genetic kidney disorder called nephronophthisis. At that time, her kidneys were functioning at about 20%. And the doctor said that with a strict renal diet and medication, she should be able to get by for quite a while, but at some point in time, you're probably going to need to think about a transplant.
Okay.
And so we started doing that, the medications and everything. And I think it was about 3 months into it, the doctor said, this is not working well and she's going to need a transplant. So Cheryl and I both went to get tested. We immediately were both almost an identical, as close as you get to being identical match, blood-wise. But then through further testing, kind of early on, it was determined that I was going to be the best choice. So in November of 2011, I donated my left kidney to Kimmy. Sorry.
Nope. That's okay.
So I'll pick up from there. So we're out to celebrate her 12-year kidney anniversary. So we're excited about that. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, right before she turns 25, it'll be 12 years. So
let me ask you, back in 2011, when she was first diagnosed, like what kinds of things were going on that, initially made you concerned or take her into the doctor, or like what was she showing? Like what kind of symptoms and stuff?
Well, one of the unique things about this rare kidney disease and nephronophthisis is that it is called juvenile, and it doesn't present itself until their preteen years.
Okay.
So up until she was 11, 12, she was a normal, active, athletic young girl. She swam on the swim team. She played volleyball. She played soccer. She was very active. Um, we did notice that she was drinking a lot of water. She'd go to bed with huge, like probably 2 liters of water.
Uh-huh.
And in the morning, it would be gone.
Oh, wow.
And so my concern was diabetes.
Yeah.
And I asked her pediatrician, they checked for diabetes and there was no signs of it. So Ross is he drinks a lot. He consumes a lot of fluids throughout the day. And so I thought, okay, she's just taking after her daddy. That's just what it's going to be for her. Not a
Right.
bad thing to drink a lot of water, but it just seemed unusual for 11 or 12, to be drinking that much water.
Yeah.
So, come to find out, then what happened, what triggered us was she began to, okay, let me back up. Her extremities started to lose calcium. Therefore, her fingers started to roll in, kind of like claws almost.
Okay.
And it was excruciating pain. So we took her to the emergency room. Of course, they did blood work. And that's what was determined, is that the calcium was being depleted from her system because of her kidney disease.
Okay.
So this was all very foreign to us. We had no idea she was had this, the beginnings of kidney failure. We were like, what is happening? So she spent the next week to 10 days in the hospital, all the tests being run, trying to get her system stabilized again because a lot of her electrolytes were off. She had lots of infusions, biopsies, things like that in that initial visit. And then they sent her home, as Ross said, on a renal diet and with some meds. So um, it wasn't typical symptoms.
Yeah.
And one of the symptoms is large, like you consume a lot of fluids. You consume a lot of liquid, I should say, not fluids.
Yeah.
So now we go, oh, okay. Well, that was why. But and they actually urinate a lot, but we had no idea how much she was urinating because she was 11 years old. So,
Yes.
Yeah.
you know, we didn't know.
Right.
So those two things are two symptoms that do occur if you know that's what you're supposed to be looking for.
Right.
But most people don't until they've already been diagnosed. Because
Is
it's
it like
unusual.
is it a rare thing? Like
Yes.
considered rare? Okay.
It's considered very rare. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. In fact, she became part of a study out of the University of Michigan because it is so rare. They sent her blood up there, and so now she was in that study, and they confirmed it 100%. The doctors here knew that about 99% sure that's what it was, but it was confirmed through all that blood work.
Okay. Yeah.
And she had her transplant at Children's Memorial Hermann.
Okay. In Houston. So did she have to go on dialysis at all?
She did not. She
Okay.
did because we were both because she had a living donor. As soon
Right.
as we found out that she was going to need a transplant, we started the process right away. So she didn't have to wait. So she was diagnosed in January and she got her transplant in November.
Oh
She
yeah.
would have got
That's
it in October, but it was actually scheduled for Halloween on 2011. And so we were talking about our cool Halloween costumes for the years to come,
yeah.
organ related. But she came down with strep throat a couple of weeks before, so they had to postpone it to
Oh
November.
yeah. Yeah.
So,
So so let me ask you this, Cheryl, and you don't have to answer this. It's kind of a hard question. So you said you both got tested and you were both ready to go and give her the kidneys. Did you have any like disappointment or anything that it wasn't you and that it was Ross? or were you kind of relieved, or it didn't matter?
Very fair question because yes. So being mama bear, as we are as mamas, and my other two children were away at college. So she was our baby. She's the only one home. No other kids needed me at that point. I was like, I am up first. If I'm a match, it's me.
Yeah.
So I was thrilled when I heard I was a perfect match. And then I proceeded to go through my testing as a possible living donor, which is very extensive,
Yeah.
um, to determine whether your body can handle giving up an organ. So I was moving along smoothly. And then they checked my GFR, which is your filtration rate of your kidneys.
Hmm.
And I think I needed to be at least a 90%, and I was at a 70. So I
Okay.
basically failed that test.
Yeah.
And basically, I would not be okay if I gave up a kidney.
Okay.
So at that point, I was very, very, very disappointed. Yeah. It
Yeah.
was a weekend of crying, to be honest. I
Yeah.
was like, how could I be a perfect match, but I can't give it to her?
Yeah.
So then, Ross says, "I'm up next." So then he went and got tested, and then he was a perfect match as well. And he passed all his tests, so he was able to donate.
Yeah.
Um, but this is the big but. Um, it was determined that it it was meant for me to be her caregiver
Yeah.
because she was a 12-year-old preteen.
Yeah.
She needed mama to be there during like those personal moments, not daddy.
Yeah.
She, um, that was my role. I needed to be the caregiver. I need to be
Yeah.
the caregiver for her. I need to be the caregiver for him. And once I got over that initial disappointment and thought, okay, Lord, that's not the role you had for me, you
Yeah.
know, I'll accept it. And it really was for the best.
Yeah. And I guess
So,
it was a blessing maybe that Ross was actually able to do it and you guys didn't have to go, through the process of trying to find somebody else or waiting for a deceased donor.
oh, it was a huge blessing.
Mm.
Yes. We were just really, um, so, so relieved when he got the green light. So,
Yeah.
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 So, um, so yes, very fair question because it's a reality.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
may not work out the way you want it to, but there's a reason. So,
Right. Yeah. So, after she got over the sore throat, and you guys finally did go in, what was that process like? And how were you feeling at that time, Ross? Like, were you nervous? Were you, excited to finally get there?
Um, yeah, a little bit nervous, and it really not so much as the procedure and everything, but my whole thought was, what if this doesn't work? I mean,
Yeah.
what if something happens? I mean, you have many things going through your mind. Um, but it was just, I mean, we're a family of faith, and we just were like, here you go, Lord, you know. But I think we both knew back when we were both a perfect match, and you may be aware of this too. Um, it's not uncommon to have like one parent uh be a perfect match, but to have
Yeah.
both of them, it's not extremely common. So I think in the get go, from that alone, both Cheryl and I, in our minds, we just in our hearts, we felt this was going to work. And so for me, it was just okay, you're going to go to sleep, and then when you wake up, you're you're going to be less a kidney.
Yeah.
But I'm more worried about Kimmy and everything she's got to go through. So for me, that part of it was it was I was just glad. I was thankful that I was able to do it, and thankful the way it turned out. I know with Cheryl, um, probably a little bit different story having her husband and her daughter
Yes, I'm
uh,
sure.
in the ER at the same time. So
yes, that's exactly right. I I felt real peaceful that day. She was covered in prayer. we had a large group of people surrounding us and at the hospital with me. So, that gave me peace. And, we sent Ross in first, and then I got to spend some time with Kimmy, and then she went in. And, yeah, initially the idea of, my husband and my baby going, into a very serious surgery at the same time was pretty nerve-wracking. But, like I said, that day I had really kind of an undescribable peace about me. And the team would come, was giving me updates. They came out and they showed me a picture of his kidney. They had taken a picture of his kidney before it went into
Oh, that's
Kimmy.
cool. Yeah.
So that was really cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, showed me how healthy it was and how, what it looked like. Um, and then before I knew it, well, not really before I knew it, it kind of was a long day, but, um, I got to go back and, see Ross, and then I got to go see Kimmy, and, you know, so they were both, in the same hospital, but in different towers. So that
Okay.
was kind of nice.
Yeah.
Um, and so I stayed with her in the PICU, and then, our other older kids were home for the Thanksgiving holidays because it happened the week of Thanksgiving,
Okay.
and they took turns staying with dad. So
Yeah.
whole family affair.
Yeah. So, I just out of my curiosity, I've never even asked this before, but do you know, like, what's the time difference between putting in a kidney and taking one out as far as surgery goes? Do you
Oh,
know?
good
Do you
question.
remember?
I don't even know if I know that.
Yeah, I
Like,
never.
from the time it came out to the
I mean,
time it
like, if you had somebody go in for a kidney transplant,
yeah,
how long that surgery takes as compared to somebody going in as a living donor.
I'm not quite sure,
Yeah,
Yeah.
to be
I never
honest.
asked that question before, and I never
Yeah,
even thought about that till you were talking, so now.
yeah. So the question you're asking um, is the surgery longer if it's a living donor, or is it
No, not
oh,
necessarily. I was just, well, I guess maybe, yeah. I mean, I was just curious as to, like, say they both went in at the same time, even though they can't do it at the same time because they have to
right.
take his out. Like, what's the time? Like, how many hours does it take for each surgery?
Mhm.
Like, what's the time difference? I don't know. It was just a passing thought.
Yeah. It's funny, I don't remember the exact out timage. I have it all written down. And
Yeah.
for anybody listening to this, if you're going to have any type of surgery or transplant or anything, we actually had what I call a friend who was a scribe. And she literally had a journal and she was writing down times, the update, times, what was happening. So we do have, I'm so thankful we have that. And it was really cool for Ross and Kimmy to go back and read that,
Yeah, I
the
think
whole
that's super
day.
important.
It was
Yeah,
scribed throughout the whole day. Yeah.
yeah. I wish I would have done that more,
Yeah.
write things down because I would like to go
Right.
back to it now and look at it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
It does. It's good to have.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, so they get through the surgery, and I'm assuming everything went great. What was the recovery like?
Well, Ross, you can talk about your recovery because it was a little unusual.
Yeah. It was, so I went in on Sunday. I got out of the hospital the following Sunday, but I had, acquired a little bit of fluid in my lungs. Otherwise I would have probably got out, a few days earlier.
Yeah.
Typically I think that's it. It's not even a full week for somebody. At the time I was 52. And my birthday was on Thanksgiving that week.
Okay.
Uh, so I turned 53 in the hospital. Um, and then for me, for once I got home, I think it was 2 to 3 weeks, before I attempted to go back to work. I think it was 3 weeks actually. Um, and then it took me probably a full year to get every bit of my energy and stuff back. And it didn't keep me from doing anything. But I just couldn't anything physical I couldn't do for, like go play around the golf.
Yeah.
I couldn't do that for a while. But for me, I mean, it was nothing. I learned after um, the urologist that removed my kidney. I still see him.
Uh-huh.
He told me that I had problems with the medical gas when when they're taking a kidney out, they pump you up so they can get in there and kind of move around.
Right.
But the doctor told me, several months after the transplant that my kidney got stuck. It got stuck in there. So they had to pump me full of more gas
Oh,
to
wow.
finally try to get it out. And so just, anybody that's had a surgery like that, the gas, it just dissipates and it seems to move up through your body and come out your shoulders. As
Oh,
crazy as
yeah.
that sounds, but
Yeah,
so
no.
I dealt with that, but I really didn't have any major issues. You know,
Yeah.
once everything healed up and I got a little bit of energy back and I was good to go. So
It's funny you talk about the gas with the shoulders because I remember when I was in the hospital recovering from my lung transplant, I had the worst pain situation in the hospital. It was like the worst pain I had the whole time, and it
wow,
was in my shoulder, and I couldn't figure out why my shoulder was hurting, and the doctors came in, um, and unfortunately, I had to deal with that pain for a long time because they didn't have the pain medicine on the floor. They had to send somebody to go get some. It was horrible. Anyway, the doctor comes in later after, I feel better, and he's like, "Well, it was probably gas." And I couldn't wrap my head around that. I thought the doctor was
oh, right,
just stupid. I was like, "What? Go back to medical school." And then I realized later that happens, and so
yeah,
it
wow,
was crazy. Yeah. I remember that shoulder pain, and it wasn't pleasant for
yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what about Kimmy? How did she do after her
Kimmy recovered. I think it was an average recovery. She was out in about 10 days.
Yeah.
Um, came home and, had to do that 3-month post care. That's
Yeah.
about what it is for kidney, 2 to 3 months. Um, back and forth in for your labs and,
Yeah.
and all that, the typical aftercare for transplant. But,
Yeah.
but overall, she recovered, at home. She was good and, just adjusting to the meds and the regimen and, you
Yeah.
know, making sure that her levels were all the trough
Yeah.
levels all they needed to be. So,
Right. Did she have any like setbacks or anything between then and now with her kidney?
um, well, an unusual thing happened, because of the rare kidney disease that she had. She had 3 kidneys that were producing urine. Remember I mentioned early on, on here that she was producing a lot of urine?
Yeah.
Well, her native kidneys did not stop producing urine. That's
Wow.
part of that
Okay.
disease. So she had 3 kidneys producing urine and she could not keep up with her fluid intake. They want you to drink 2 to 3 liters a day. Well, she was getting dehydrated, so she was getting back in. She had to go back in and she was in and out the first year quite a bit while we tried to get that all figured out. Finally, they approached her and said, we can take out your native kidneys. It's going to be another surgery. And initially she was like, no, I don't want another surgery, right?
Yeah.
And, but they said, but you're going to have to really increase your fluid intake. She's like, I don't know if I can increase it anymore.
Yeah.
I'm already drinking so much. So she tried it for a couple months. It was very difficult. And she finally said, okay, let's take them out. So she did have her native kidneys removed. And actually that surgery seemed like it was longer than the transplant surgery.
Really?
Yeah, but, because they took them out in pieces, so it
Yeah.
wouldn't be too invasive, and it was all laparoscopic, so,
Yeah.
uh, just took a long time. But so once those were taken out, now she only has her transplanted kidney and, things that have stabled out a lot after that, so.
I think it's fascinating that they don't take out the kidneys and they just
Mhm.
stack them in there. Like when the first time I heard
Yeah.
that, I
Wait,
was like,
yeah, it goes in the front right groin is where it goes.
I didn't know that. No. I didn't know. I just figured they just throw them in there, as they're
Yeah.
floating
uh,
around.
I
Yeah, I
know,
think
it's
that's
crazy.
fascinating.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's in her front right groin, and I guess if she gets another one, it goes on the left side, and
Really? That's interesting. Wow. So
mhm.
how old was she when she did that second procedure?
She was still 12. It was
Oh, it
within,
was pretty early
yeah.
on.
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
No, 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 she had turned 13. I'm sorry.
Oh,
It
okay.
was the next year. Yeah, within the
Yeah.
next. So, um, yeah, so it ended up being a good thing, but,
Hmm. Well, that's
um,
great. And so now how is she doing?
she's good. She's doing great. She, graduated from A&M last year, and
Fantastic.
she is working on becoming a child life specialist to work in the children's hospitals.
That's great.
Yes, her dream will be to work for Texas Children, so we'll hoping that happens for her.
Yeah.
And, but yeah, and her as far as her health goes, she's stable
Okay.
and, doing what she needs to do.
What about you, Ross? Have you been stable and good and no problems?
I've been fine. I've
Yeah.
not had an issue.
Yeah.
uh, really from,
That's great. So,
it's, uh, just, which is good. And it hasn't kept me from doing anything. I don't feel any different. It's just
yeah.
got to kind of be aware of it, that need to keep fluids, and I've only got one kidney now. So,
Yeah.
um, got to take care of it.
Yeah. Did she name her kidney?
She did not name it. Mhm.
Yeah.
I know some people do, right?
She's actually the first one that I've heard that hasn't named it. Maybe it's because you gave it to her, Ross, but everybody
Maybe.
Yeah,
seems to name it something,
I
you know?
know. Yeah, it might be because, and that's part of the whole uh psychological talk you have, is that they put you through is like, whose kidney is it?
Yeah.
Is it really? And I remember they asked me that when I was going through it, and I said, it's hers. Is that the right answer? It's hers.
Yeah, I
Um,
believe I can see why they would ask that because they wouldn't want people to think that.
yeah, no, you can't put the guilt on them,
Right, yeah.
You can hear my kidney. That's my kidney in there. You can't do that.
Although she was a teenager at the time, so maybe you could use that for a little bit of leverage, I don't
Exactly.
know.
I think we joked around about that when she
Yeah.
Oh,
was
yeah. I did threaten to take it back on several occasions.
That's awesome. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about where you guys are now and what the amazing things that you guys have been doing with your foundation.
Okay. Well, so, um, there, after transplant, there are, uh, probably with any illness, cancer and things like that, there are support groups, there's summer camps for kids and things like that, which, and there are for, transplant kids. And we encourage Kimmy, we never pushed her, but we encouraged her to get involved and things. And she just never just wasn't there mentally, just had no
Yeah.
desire. Right. And so,
Can I jump in on that
yeah,
idea? Because, as you mentioned, she was a teenager at this point,
Yeah.
and all she really cared about as far as being a teenager was being normal. She
Yeah.
didn't want any attention brought to her. She wanted to fit in as much as possible, Um, because she was in a hospital about a year after transplant, she did lose friends.
Yeah.
Kids, they're teenagers, life goes on for them,
Right.
So, she really resisted anything that we tried to encourage her to do, that made her feel like she wasn't normal.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So anyway, fast forward to 2016, Kimmy is now 17 years old, and she went to a summer camp that our church puts on every year. And she's still living at home. She came home that Sunday night, and Cheryl and I asked her, how to go, and she said it went great. She goes, it was laid on my heart this weekend that I need to tell my story and use it to help kids going through what I went through. And so Cheryl and I are like, oh, what does that even mean? We're just a million things going on.
Mhm.
So, um, we talked a lot about it. We prayed a lot about it. We just started looking into different things and just decided that, you know what, let's start a nonprofit and let's, kind of become part of the circle of care for pediatric transplant families. And so we did, and we hooked up with an organization. They help people start nonprofits because literally, Cheryl and I had no idea. We didn't even know
Yeah.
where to start, right? And so we aligned with them. We worked with them for 6 months, and at the end of 2016, we got our 501(c)(3) paperwork. And then in July of 2017, we officially launched with our programming.
Yeah.
And so, one of our programs, our first program that we had is what we call our Hope Lifeline. It's really like a mentoring program. And we knew we could do that without needing money, right?
Right.
Because when we first found out that quote unquote, your child needs a life-saving kidney transplant, it would have been really beneficial to know another family who had a child that had gone through, it doesn't matter if it's a kidney or not, but the transplant process. You have a million questions, right? And the doctors can answer and they can tell you everything you need to know medically, but
Right.
we just, what is life like? What can we expect and all these sort of things. And later on towards the end, before our transplant, we did meet a family. Uh, but we wanted to put that in place. And so that's what we started with, right? And then we just come alongside a family here as their child needs a transplant. We just kind of come along beside them and kind of take the journey with them and, be there for them, answer any questions they have and just, give them hope. That's the main thing right there.
Yeah.
Um, the other thing, obviously, we're became big advocates for people becoming organ donors.
Yeah.
So right out of the gate, we connected with Life Gift and the Living Bank here in Houston. And so we are advocates for people becoming organ donors and out in the community and do things together with them. Um, where we live in Spring, and we're not quite an hour with no traffic to the medical center, right? So,
Right.
um, but a lot of things that we do, there's some things that ate us alive financially, that you don't think about are parking, food, gas, medicines, and copays.
Right.
So we knew that we wanted to help families financially, but we weren't real sure how to do that right out of the gate because you want to help somebody. It's like, do we pay their mortgage? Do we pay their bills? Do we pay their car? So many things. And we struggled with that for a long time. But we finally decided that we're going to focus on the things that, that we struggled with.
Yeah.
And so we provide the families in need, financial need. Up until 2022, it was in the form of a $500 Visa gift card to help offset some of those incidentals, like I just mentioned. And then in beginning of 2022, we upped that to $750 per family. Now, everything we do comes to us via the social workers at
Right.
either Texas Children's or Children's Memorial Hermann, right?
Yeah.
Um, so if they have
Yes. Yeah. Can I intervene at that? Yeah. So if a family has needs, they have to go through their social worker to
Okay.
access any financial assistance from us. So that way we know that we're helping the families that are most in.
Yeah. It's probably a little easier to screen that also. Like you don't have to worry
Right.
about.
There are vetting steps. Yeah.
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 uh,
Yeah.
If they say they need assistance, then we're going to trust they need assistance.
Yeah.
So
so we put that in place, and then our long term vision is to build a pediatric transplant hospitality house. You think of Ronald McDonald House or Nora's Home here in Houston.
Right.
That was our goal, our vision, and we knew that's going to be a long way off. It's going to take a lot of money, a lot of time, and we thought maybe in the meantime that once we started getting funding coming in, that we could rent or maybe even buy a 5-bedroom home, close to the medical center that we could put families on and they could be there to support one another and, and kind of get our feet wet in the hospitality housing arena. And so, that was in, it's going to be called Kimmy's Cottage, both spelled with a K.
Yeah.
So that's our plan. That was our vision. So in 2018, we met a couple that they own a company called Express Corporate Housing. And so they're finding corporate executives places to stay all over the US, right? And things like that. And they took an interest in what we do, and we met with them. We had lunch with them a couple of times. We had dinner with them several times. And they came back to us at one of the dinners and said, we love what you're doing. And here's what we'd like to do to help. We're going to donate 2 apartments. They are 2 bed, 2 baths. They're fully furnished, have all the housewares, washer and dryer, and they're located 2 blocks from Texas Children's Hospital. We want to provide those so when families have to come to Houston from out of town, out of state, out of country, for their child's treatment, we'll have a place to put them. And so uh, they donated that, and so we're like, we never even talked about apartments. We never even
Yeah.
dreamed about them. But we had 2 to begin with. We needed a third almost immediately. Of course, we let the Texas Children's and Children's Memorial Hermann know that we have these available now. And so we got a third pretty quick after that. So fast forward to today, we now operate 7 of those apartments.
That's fantastic.
We provide these apartments to the families for absolutely no cost or as long as they need to stay. So I think to date, we have I know it's almost 8,200 nights of hospitality stay for families that we've been able to provide, again, at no cost to them whatsoever. So we've had a waiting list ever since we started. We continue to have a waiting list. I know that the majority of the families have come to us through Texas Children's. We have recently just had a family from Children's Memorial Hermann join us. And so we're kind of at the point now, but one thing that we've learned through all this, Jenny, is that the proximity to the hospital and even Children's Memorial Hermann, I mean, it's just down the block from Texas Children's Hospital.
Yeah.
Uh, the mom or dad, whoever it is in the hospital, they have the ability to come to the apartment, take a shower, wash clothes, cook a meal. But the best thing about it is a lot of these families have other children besides the one that needs a transplant. And the children can come and stay in the apartments,
Yeah.
versus some other type,
Right.
hospitality housing where they can visit, but they can't necessarily stay. So, um, it's got us thinking about a lot of things, and, uh, maybe we want to restructure our long-term vision a little bit because these are working out so well. And again, we never even talked about apartments, but
Yeah.
uh, it's really been a great thing for them.
The thing about apartments, from working at Nora's home, I think a lot of people like the apartment. Well, I think there's both on both sides. I think, and what I've heard from working there is people, when they go stay at the apartments, it's nice because they have their own space, they have their own kitchen, they have their own, whatever, they have their own rules. And then when you stay at Nora's home, you kind of have to share all that. And so I think myself personally, and don't get me wrong, I adore Nora's home. I love
Oh, we do
Nora's
too.
home.
Oh,
We too. Yeah.
I think if I were going through something like that, I think personally I would prefer an apartment just because I'm the kind of person that likes my own space. But and then of course, Nora's home, you got the people around. But I think it's great to have an apartment. Like if I were to go into doing what you 2 are doing, the apartment life is what I would want to do just because I think I think
Yeah.
it's just good.
Yeah, like Ross said, we never even imagined going the apartment route, but it actually has been a great way for us to learn about the hospitality world.
Right. Yeah.
but we're not responsible for the maintenance.
Right. Yeah.
You know, there's things that are kind of, thank goodness we're not responsible for.
Right.
Uh, I mean, we are responsible. I mean, we take care of maintenance, obviously, but we don't have to provide the maintenance,
Right. Yeah.
And whereas if it was our own place, we would. But and it has just been so wonderful to have, like Ross said, the families, grandparents can come.
Yeah.
The siblings can come. Like we have siblings now that have come for the summer to stay with their parents and their mom who's been away for, months at a time.
Yeah.
And they can come together as a family unit. And we just believe that also helps so much in the healing process of that
Absolutely.
child
Yeah.
to have his siblings around and his family around and his grandparents around if they need to come.
Yeah.
And a lot of people probably don't think about this, but when you go through any type of medical challenge, it's very challenging, especially if it's a child, when your child, it's very challenging on your marriage.
Yeah.
You, you-
For sure.
and you don't take time for each other,
Yeah.
like, because your focus is so much on your child. And, the apartments allow that. They allow that. They allow them to be, together as a couple and,
Yeah.
keep their marriage strong, you know. But so we're really blessed that we've been able to provide so many nights of, housing
Yeah.
for these families and be a little
So
part of the journey.
is your long-term goal still going to have a Kimmy's cottage? Or do you think you're going to probably stick with
We
apartments?
don't know.
Yeah.
We kind of been reevaluating that.
Yeah.
And if we do, it's going to be called Kimmy's Cottages,
Oh, cottages. Okay.
and it would be set up more into individual cottages.
I
So you
see.
would
Yeah.
still have that uh, independence, I guess, a little bit.
Yeah.
But still with a central meeting location where the families can come together and support one another and cook and do whatever.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's what we love about Nora's home. We love that whole
Yeah.
support system that is provided there for
Okay.
the families that are there. That's, and we try to encourage our families to get together. We try to have little things for them to get together as well. And it's just harder, because uh, they're not forced to be together.
Yeah.
It's easier to say, you know.
Yeah.
it's-
The 7 apartments that you have now, are they kind of all in the same building, or do you have different places around?
done the
Well, they're
same.
all in the same apartment complex.
Okay.
The complex, I believe, has 14 buildings and then townhomes. And some of our units are in the same buildings
Okay.
and some are not.
Yeah.
Yeah, we haven't ever been able to time it where we can have, we want this whole building,
Yeah.
Yeah. So we haven't ever been able to time it like that. But we do have 3 that are literally one on top of another. So
Okay.
they're in close proximity. So they have each other. And
Yeah.
interestingly enough, this is the first time this has ever happened. All 7 apartments right now are occupied by heart transplant families.
Really? That's
Yep.
interesting. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
Must have had an influx of heart transplants.
I know. That's just,
And
little baby, it's just,
yeah.
yeah.
And I'm sure it's a little bit more difficult because the clients that you have are, I don't know what you call them, but your residents,
We call them our guests.
guests, there you go. They're
Mhm.
all children who've had
Yeah.
transplants, and that's probably
Yeah.
hard to see sometimes.
It
Yeah.
is. It
Yeah.
is, especially when some of them are just babies,
Yeah. Yeah.
They're not even a year old and they're having a transplant,
Yeah. I met a couple families at Norris Home when I worked there with babies, and I was like, I don't even know
I,
how you
yeah,
handle that. Yeah.
I guess, Kimmy put this in perspective one day, is I think it was one of our very first families. He was young. He was probably 3, I think, when he got his transplant. And we were there the day of the transplant and everything. And she was getting emotional, and she was like, Mom, she says, I remember everything because, she was a teenager,
Yeah.
and she says, he's not going to remember any of this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, I guess you can always look at it like that, I
Yeah.
don't remember the hard stuff as far as the recovery in the hospital and all that. So,
Right. Yeah.
but, it's hard. Yeah. It's hard when it's kids for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I've always thought, because I grew up with cystic fibrosis
Mhm.
and I knew, well, later on, I knew eventually it's going to be time for a transplant. And then you talk to people who are perfectly healthy, and then all of a sudden they're sick and they have to go through this transplant process. And for me, I was already used to being sick. I was already used to taking medications. And then for
Yeah.
somebody who's just now having to just like completely change everything that they do, it was probably more difficult for them than it was for me. And so when you have a little baby, they don't have to go through that hard change
Mm.
because, like you said, they're not going to remember. So it's
Yeah.
just harder for the
And they
parent.
grow up, they grow up taking their medication. They don't know any
Right.
different.
Yeah.
That's just, yeah. So, I don't know if that's good or bad, but, you
Yeah.
know, hmm
Well,
yeah.
that's fantastic. I think that you guys are doing great things for people. And
Thank you.
I think when I first met you, you guys only had 4 units, and now you're up to 7. So that's fantastic that you guys are growing, and it's so great all the wonderful things that you guys are doing to help all
Well,
these
thank you so
families.
much. Yeah, we're just, and we're going to keep going. I mean, as long as we can keep getting funding and the need is there. And, um, I don't know. It's a day at a time,
Yeah,
basically.
Right. Yeah. And we are just, just so grateful to be a part of the transplant community, like meeting you and your organization and everything you guys are doing. Nora's home and just,
yeah,
Life Gift, Living Bank, just so many great transplant organizations, such a unique niche,
yeah,
and that we can just be there to support each other and just help as many transplant people as we can,
yeah,
families, patients, whatever it is. So all this information you're getting out to people through your podcast is amazing.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So helpful.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a great little family that we're all in. We're all in it
I know.
together. So
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. It really is. It really is.
So I do have one more question for you guys. And then I just want to ask you about how people can, find you and support you. But the question I have is let me see. So I guess it might be a little bit different for both of you, but if you guys had a family who has a child that you found out that is going to need a transplant, what advice would you give to that family that you wish that you had known before you started your whole process that might be helpful to them?
I
Yeah.
think for me, the importance of having a support team around you and not to be afraid to ask questions of your medical team. Make sure you understand, especially if you have not been in the medical world like we weren't. We were not. Everything was thrown at us so fast, so quickly.
Yeah.
Uh, I was very overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And I think first of all, you need to make sure you have a good medical team that you feel comfortable asking questions. You don't feel intimidated. You need to understand what's happening. And, especially if you're a pediatric family, you are your child's advocate. You are it. So, don't be afraid to ask those hard questions, or even if it's a question, there's not a dumb question. So,
Okay.
my, Kimmy would often say, "Mom, you're being mama bear," and I'm like, "You bet I am," and I never stop,
Yeah.
because this is your life, this is your health,
Yeah.
Yes, so make sure you're with a transplant team that you feel comfortable with. You feel like you're getting the best care you can get. You're not, feeling intimidated or anything. And then the other thing, as I was saying, that's part of your support system is who's around you and as your medical team, but then also, you know, get people around you who've been through it. Get people around, if you have a good family support system, lean on them,
Yeah.
lean on them. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Because, we had a caregiver, a donor, and a recipient. And, you know, I needed help. I
Yeah.
really did, So I was very fortunate that, our church family rallied around us. Our family was always there. Um, but I was so grateful we didn't have to go through it alone. And so,
Yeah.
I think support
Yeah.
on both ends.
Yeah.
And
I
that's what
think
I
that's
would
great.
say too would be um, just having that support. And initially, like I said, when I mean, I know that we felt so much better after we met this family who the dad had given his son a kidney when his son was 16 months old. This was several years later that we met them, but it was just nice it was just almost like this weight lifted off because you feel isolated. This is your battle that you got to fight. But like Cheryl said, man, just you got to lean on your family, your friends, uh, everybody that you can, and just to have that support. And again, that's kind of what we're hoping. Hopefully, we can bring in us, and there's other organizations as well that it's just nice to talk to somebody. I mean, it
Yeah.
just to know that been there, done that, and again that beacon of hope, if you will, that well,
Yeah.
they went through it, and you know, and you can always, we can always put you in touch, whatever organ, your child needs, or we know people and other people know people
Yeah.
that their child has specifically had that organ transplant. And so it just makes it, you know, you're not in it alone. I guess that's the best thing. And the support system, to gather that support from wherever you can, because you
Yeah.
need it.
For sure. I agree. I agree with both of you.
Mhm.
Great advice. Okay. So, um, let's plug your your foundation a little. So tell people how they can find you, how they can support you if they can, and if they want to reach out to you or
Okay. So the easiest thing, I mean, the name of our organization is Children's Transplant Initiative, or CTI, as most people call it now.
yeah.
Um, our website is www.cti-tx, like the Texas abbreviation,
Yeah.
.org. Um, every bit of information, our contact information, donation buttons, everything is on the website. We're kind of currently going through it now to revamp the website, but it's still fully functional. So,
Okay.
um, both, my name, Cheryl's name, our phone numbers, everything's on there. If
Perfect.
anybody wants to reach out, um, our email addresses are Ross at cti-tx.org or Cheryl at cti-tx.org. So, um, very, very,
Yeah. All that's on the website.
uh-huh.
Yeah. And we have a golf tournament coming up. So if anybody loves to golf, that information will also be coming up on the website very soon.
That's
That's
awesome.
happening in September. I mean,
Okay.
October, September.
October. We'll have next year. Our big fundraiser every year is a sporting clay shoot,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we've always done it in February to kind of get ahead. Of course, here in Houston, the oil industry, there's a lot of big oil field clay shoots, so we
Oh,
always do it in February to kind of, hey, come knock the rust off and get ready for these other shoots and stuff.
yeah.
But next year, we have booked the last Friday in April, which is the last Friday of pediatric transplant week.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay.
that will be that Friday. So we're excited about that. To kind of end that week, if you will.
Yeah.
Um,
With a bang. With a
Yeah.
bang.
with
With
a
a bang.
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 Perfect. That's great. That's great. That's
So,
awesome.
so
Okay. Okay. Well, very good. So I appreciate you guys coming on and talking with me and sharing everything about Kimmy and Ross. I know you've already heard it from Kimmy and Cheryl and everybody else, but I have so much respect for living donors, and on behalf of your daughter, thank you.
Well,
And
thank you so much. And I appreciate it. So I tell people that, I'm grateful to hear that, but I think it's any parent who's capable of it would not bat an eye and not even give it a
Yeah.
second thought and do it. So, but thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you
Great.
so much, Jenny, for having
Oh,
us
yeah.
on.
Oh, you're
We
welcome.
appreciate all the education you're getting out there.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
But the great work you're doing.
Thank you. And you guys have a great rest of your week. And I'm sure I'll see you around again soon.
Thanks.
do.
Thank you for listening to the Pre to Post Transplant Podcast. Please be sure to subscribe to the podcast and follow us on Facebook. Oh, and if you have not signed up to be an organ donor, please visit www.organdonor.gov and register today. You too can save lives.